Hi, my name is Leah J, and welcome to this free motion quilting project video. Today I am back working on Express Your Love and stitching back through those sections of words that we stitched in the last video. This time I'm working with blue thread and echoing those letters so it fills the space completely with beautiful texture. Let me show you exactly what this looks like so far. So here you can see this beautiful blue texture. All I've done is gone into the space and echo quilted working into the area. Sometimes I've had to get a little creative with how I've echoed around a particular letter, and in order to avoid a lot of thread breaks, I've kind of jumped over those thread painted letters in certain situations. Now, it's completely up to you how you handle stuff like that. If you don't like the way that that looks at all, that little jump right there where I got into that O, it's perfectly fine to just break your thread and move into that area instead of stitching over it in that way. I kind of looked at it, and realistically I just did not have the time to be breaking thread that often, and I don't find that too distracting. I don't think it ruins the piece in any way to have made that decision. But it's one of those design decisions that really is kind of a personal thing, and it's entirely up to you. It is going to change the look and effect of the quilt however you decide to do it, but it's really not that big of a deal whether you decide to break thread with every one of those kind of inside spaces, leave them empty, or do that little stitching over it and get into that area to fill it. It honestly doesn't matter which way you pick. Just pick one, go with it, and be happy that you're quilting. That's the most important thing. So let me show you exactly how this works. I'm working into this smaller section right here, and I'm just going to get started. And I kind of like to get started in like a corner area. Like right here would be a good place to drop my needle down. And one thing that I do whenever I'm echo quilting around, and it's in a different color thread, I really like to go on ahead and edge stitch this. And so that's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to go on ahead and basically kind of, I guess, the essential stitching this in the ditch. And you might be wondering why I'm bothering to do this when I already have that white thread that is stitching in the ditch. You know, I already have that outline quilting in white. And the reason is I'm working in blue, and the echoing is going to be in blue. I'm going to do a lot of traveling against the edges with this blue thread. And personally, this is just something, kind of a weird, funky thing about me, I think that I need another line of outline quilting in blue that I can travel against as I'm doing all this moving around this space. Is this absolutely required? No, but I do think it looks better on both the front and the back of the quilt, and it's an extra little step that I always do. Whenever I'm working in multiple colors, if you look very closely at my quilt, you will see that it's been edge stitched both in the two colors that are next to one another. So if the area is yellow and orange, it's going to have edge stitching or stitching in the ditch, whatever you want to call it, in both of those colors, simply because I think that it's necessary to have that separate space. Just think of it kind of like coloring in a coloring book. You color in a coloring book and you fill that whole space, and then you go to the next space and you fill it completely. Well, that little bit of thread, it's kind of like a little outline you do with your color pencil, go around the area. It's kind of like that, and it's just a personal thing. I like to edge stitch with each color that I'm working with, and so that way I know I have a better potential of travel stitching with that same color, and I just think it makes it look a little bit better. But that's just me. Do you have to do it? No. It's just an extra little step, and it's one of those things that I think sometimes does get looked at by judges if you decide that you want to show your quilt. So now I'm going to work around and start echoing. You know, whether you decide to do the edge stitching or stitching in the ditch, it's completely up to you. But now start to echo quilt. And again, you do have to be kind of creative about how you get into these spaces and wiggle in and wiggle back out again. Some of them get a little funny, and sometimes the fabric wants to do some funny things too. So you just have to kind of get in there and wiggle around. Now, if you get to a point where, like, oh, I could have gotten closer, oh, that's not consistent, you know, like right here on this M, I could have come up further into that space right there. please don't obsess about it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. These are just letters. And the blue, or the alternate color thread, is not going to stand out nearly as much as the letters are. This is really just texture. We're just going for a pretty effect on the surface of the quilt more than anything else. And if you make a mistake, please don't feel like you have to rip it out, because that's not the point and purpose of this project. So I'm going to swing around inside this space. Now I know that this is going to get narrow and impossible to get back into, so I'm going to go ahead and fill it completely. Like I said, sometimes you have to be a little creative about how you get into these spaces and fill them all the way out. Okay, so right here I have this area where I have this P and it's a closed letter. So I'm going to just kind of hop in and fill that space completely and then hop back out again. Is it perfect? No. Does it look okay? Yes. Am I going to leave it? Yes. So just understand that the echo quilting, particularly if you use a darker thread, you can get away with a lot more, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And more than anything else, that this is just adding some extra texture between the letters. The letters should really be doing kind of the bulk of the design work in this situation themselves. So I'm going to hop inside this R. And hop back out again. And there are also a lot of different ways of kind of setting your, this is your foundation is the letters, and then you're working around it and using those letters as a base. And there's a lot of different things you can do. You don't have to just echo quilt. You can use that as a base and stitch straight lines into the center. You can use it in a lot of different ways. You could stitch stippling around it. It really honestly doesn't matter. Just so long as you're just adding some texture and doing what you want, making sure it looks the way you want it to on the surface of your quilt. I really like the echoes because it seems to expand and really branch out those letters and bring them out, make them even bigger. And I really like that. It also fills up the entire space with a really subtle texture. It's not kind of flashy or overwhelming. It's just real subtle, and I really like that about it. We're working around this letter H. And another option, if you really didn't like the idea of kind of that edge stitching idea of stitching in the ditch with multiple times, multiple colors, that kind of thing, if that just really doesn't appeal to you, another idea would be to secure your quilt initially with water-soluble thread. And if you secure it with water-soluble thread, well then you can stitch whatever color you're working through the quilt with and go ahead and do your outline quilting, and you won't have to have the areas of, like multiple colors kind of built up on top of one another, because you have that water-soluble thread staying in place. You also don't have to switch colors to do your edge stitching, your stitching in the ditch. You don't have to change colors constantly. The water-soluble thread would go in there and allow you to edge stitch much more quickly. And then of course it will wash out whenever you wash your quilt, so you just want to make sure that you quilted over those areas with the real thread in whatever color you want to use. So I hope that makes sense. So definitely an option we're going to be utilizing this year a little bit in different situations. Okay. So we are nearly finished with this, but you can already see how this pretty texture is coming together. So that's it for this week. I really hope that you'll give this a try. Stitch some letters on your quilt, work around them with simple echoing. It's a fun way to learn echoing, and it can be also a challenge. Do understand that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect because the letters can be really tricky to get around and be consistent. keeping that consistent distance and stuff all the way around them. So understand that even I am struggling with this, and I'm just making it as good as I can and not worrying too much about the perfectionism side of this. So I hope that that makes sense and that you will give this a try. My name is Leah Day with the Free Motion Quilting Project. Find more videos on making this quilt, quilting many different designs, at freemotionproject.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.